Hello, I'm Gus Downing, publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. We're here today with John Mattis, Vice President, Asset Protection, Investigations, and ORC at Macy's. Today's session is all about redefining and quantifying ORC. John, thanks for being here.
Great, thank you.
You know, John, ORC has changed and grown dramatically over the years. And we really need to redefine it, with cybercrime having a much larger impact than anyone considered in the past. I mean, how is it impacting ORC, and what does that trickle-down effect look like?
Well, when you look at ORC today, the whole phenomena of ORC, traditionally it was what happened in the four walls of the store. Mm-hmm. And it has really changed as the retail landscape has changed. So when you bring on the whole omni environment and the constantly evolving way of retail and the online presence, that brings in more of a cyber element and the cyber criminal that's been able to infiltrate some of our systems in the retail community. So when I say that we need to include the cyber element of it, really includes a lot of aspects of the whole e-commerce piece of it, the ability for some of these ORC groups that work in very high technology environments that are infiltrating some of our systems, whether it's a retail system or financial systems, such as cyber breaches and things like that, to be able to get identities of individuals, pedigree information, credit card information. All of that has a trickle down to the retailer. They're going to be utilizing that card data. They're going to be utilizing some of that stolen identities in our stores, online, and things like that. So when we say the cyber element of ORC is really as the retail environment has changed, so must the ORC definition to include all of the different aspects of how ORC is attacking the retail community today.
Like skimming and cloning cards, and all of that.
Everything, everything. But even the more technical pieces of it. So a lot of the phishing schemes, a lot of the con games that are going on, the straight out cyber breaching that's going on where they're infiltrating credit card companies, financial institutions. A lot of universities and colleges have had a significant amount of breach of their students. And what we're seeing a lot of today is the healthcare industry, which is a significant amount of, real raw pedigree information. Everything from name, social, everything you could possibly imagine in order to open up credit in someone's name, a healthcare institution would have. So a significant amount of cyber breaches have occurred in those environments. And, that's going to trickle down to the retailer. So it's really important that we are ever evolving. As the ORC phenomena is evolving, so must our definition and what we include in those individuals that are just attacking us from all different angles.
From a standpoint of the numbers and such is what you're referring to.
Standpoint of the numbers, as well as the investigative piece of it,
right.
The law enforcement piece of it, the legislative branch, to be more all-inclusive of what ORC really means.
We've all heard that ORC has historically been $30 billion problem for the retail industry, and last year we heard the $60 billion number, but no one's been able to clearly quantify or substantiate the number. What are your thoughts?
I think one of the reasons is that when you look at a lot of the surveys out there that are different branches of retail, different branches of the retail community and the vendor community come together to be able to put together a survey, which is all great information, but I think we need to be more global in our thought process as to the overall impact of ORC, especially on the technology end, especially on the global impact. So you say, what is the ORC loss in the United States? What's the global ORC loss? And it really comes down to, I think that the walls are down. So it is really a global phenomenon as far as organized retail crime. But when you look at it as far as what the losses are, the losses are going to be, if you're an American company, you'll sustain your losses internally in American dollars. But the infiltration that's happening and the attacking of your systems will all occur from a four-wall perspective. It's all going to occur from a global perspective. So we're seeing it across the board, whether it be from, again, the technical and the cyber angle being worldwide, as well as the individual fraud operations, identity theft, straight-out theft rings, all have a global presence. And they're hitting us both here locally and hitting, obviously, retailers all across the world.
And then how do we differentiate the U.S. versus what that looks like versus the global number?
I don't know if you need to. I think you need to be able to say this is a global phenomenon. Mm-hmm. So, whether you're going to say what the
As
American...
they're speaking about cybercrime.
Yeah, when you're cybercrime
phenomenon.
and organized retail crime.
Right.
So you could say it's going to be, this is what the U.S. loss will be. Mm-hmm. That's great, we're going to have that number, and this is what the global loss will be. Mm-hmm. But you really need to look at it as far as what the overall global effect is, because if we just say what it's going to be for the United States, then we're really narrowing our thought processes to really the overall impact that organized retail crime has. So, we'll have our national number, but really we need to be able to look at it as a global phenomenon, how it's impacting retailers.
And quite frankly, I've never heard it looked at that way. Yeah. You hear of counterfeits, you hear of credit cards, you hear of cybercrime on a global perspective, but you don't hear about ORC at a global perspective. Yeah. Although, obviously the UK, it's all over the place.
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously.
And we've talked about this time and time again, and I have a very aggressive thought process when it comes to organized retail crime and the impact and what the dollars are and what the impact is, the legislation, the law enforcement piece, where we need to be as far as national database and the sharing of information. When I say those things, it comes from an aggressive thought process, but I think that we need to be aggressive in our thought process and how we look at organized retail crime in order to get people's attention on this topic.
Mm-hmm. Put all this together and we have a major issue with the ORC financial impact that may be far greater than even your $60 billion number. Now let's put it into perspective. I mean, what's the number, in your opinion, that we should be stating?
I think that we should be looking at no less than $100 billion. So when you look at...
On a global scale?
On a global scale, and you could probably apply that to a U.S. scale. So when you look at the overall shortage rate of all retail in the United States, it's operating at about the 1.4%. 1.4% of all sales, generally in the retail community is attributed to shortage. So that's basic merchandise loss.
Right.
So let's take the overall thought process of what's the real impact of shortage. So the real impact of shortage is not just merchandise loss, but it's really the overall profit and profit protection of retailers. So when you add into that the overall fraud impact, and not just the credit card fraud, all different types of fraud, to include like the cyber breaches, the phishing attempts, the cyber denials of service, the stolen and exfiltration of data that comes from our credit facilities and everything like that. That has to be added into it. So when you look at that, and you look at some of the surveys that are out there, namely like the LexisNexis reports, you're looking at about 1.4% of all of fraud sales, so fraud percent to fraud transactions, you have to add that in there. So that could be that's almost $100 billion right there from an overall fraud perspective. So when you say you put the two together, it's over $200 billion in overall loss.
Yeah, I was going to say it's much greater than $100 billion.
I think that $100 billion in ORC loss is a conservative number.
Sure,
is a conservative number, and we need to be looking at it that way. So when you do, that will get the attention that this topic deserves with our legislation, both at the state level, which has done a great job in passing ORC legislation. There's still, I believe, 17 states left that we need legislation, namely California, which is a biggie. New York just passed, which was huge. But from a legislation as well as a law enforcement commitment to investigating with us on this topic. So it's a broad topic. The ORC phenomena continues to evolve, but I think that you really need to be able to look at it from really a multi-dimensional approach.
Well, and I agree with your global thoughts. I mean, the Daily can specifically point to the exact same groups hitting the UK that have hit the States with crews, both from a skimming perspective and from hitting the stores.
Yes.
I know a specific Romanian group reported in the Daily, obviously, that had operatives in both countries. That has been pointed out in the Daily, although we haven't written about it yet. It's just something that we noticed in the last year that's coming out in our ORC report over the next week or two. But interesting. Well, thank you for stopping out.
Thank you.
Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen, for this episode. We'd like to thank you for watching. And until next time, let's keep them safe out there.